let's recap the story for everyone, shall we? The magus, America's been transported to another world. America kicked ass in a 17th century world, or kingdom. Kicked ass in a height of World War I kingdom. Now occupies both. One kingdom, which essentially is France, is invaded in a blitzkrieg fashion from Nazi elves who were supposedly gone for 150 fucking years. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the blitzkrieg continues. So, what happens in the newest chapter of America and Another World? Well, a lot. Mostly a fighting retreat. And their plan is actually pretty good. The Magus Imperium losing their tanks and basically being nothing but infantry, which, by the way, the title alone of this chapter is called The 300. I love that. I really do. That is a good reference to, of course, the Spartans who held their ground at the Hoth Gates. Or at least, according to the story and the history. That, ironically enough, the Spartan story is still kind of up in the air. Either way, though. So, what's going on? Oh, baby! Let's go! So, the Magus Imperium, or at least the Frenchies, which, unlike their earthly counterparts, who are a bunch of frog leg eating, cheese munching surrender monkeys! They aren't surrender monkeys. No, they aren't. In fact, they are fighting and holding the ground as best they can. This is essentially a defense. Well, if I had to use historical context, obviously we can go by the title alone and compare this to 300, because the soldiers who do defend this town, which is leading to a bridge, is about 385 men. So yes, 300 is a good assumption of this. Or we can go with the defense of Belgium, where Belgian troops held out against German attacks over and over and over again, resisting and biting, literally making the Germans think that there were more troops than there actually were. Or, once again, the Ardennes, where French troops held out and continued to fight the Germans even though they were blitzkrieging. They were fighting the Ghost Division as best as possible, which, yes, if you want to compare the Nazi elf divisions to what they were, they are essentially Ghost Division. While not being headed by a Rommel, it is still being headed by a female elf general who is wanting to push on the offensive. Or if we really wanted to do another one, Dunkirk. But we haven't seen a Dunkirk yet. This is definitely something like Dunkirk, where French soldiers, brave French soldiers, held out and held the ground against German, well, Wehrmacht soldiers. Again, there are many good historical examples where soldiers held the line and defended against massive, overwhelming odds. But I'll let you guys choose a good example in the comments section. Now, what does the otherworldly French do? Well, they're being told to retreat. However, a lieutenant colonel understands that they cannot retreat. They have to hold the line and defend until all civilians are evacuated. This is a massive evacuation of civilians to get across a bridge to destroy the bridge. And even a higher officer, a higher ranking officer, tells the lieutenant colonel, look, you will be left on this side of the bridge with no support, no help whatsoever. You have to evacuate with us. But the lieutenant colonel does give a good reason why he cannot abandon the post. They have to hold out to help make sure that the civilians can get across, and the bridge can be blown basically be blown. They cannot allow these elves, essentially, these Nazi elves, to follow behind. They have to hold the line in order to buy time for the evacuation to complete. This is a brave act, and I commend this soldier. I commend this otherworldly Frenchie for holding out and being a good patriot. Even though they don't have any tanks. Well, don't worry. While, yes, they don't have any tanks with them for support, they do, in fact, have artillery. And we'll get into that in a minute. They do have artillery, but no crews. No spotters, no spotting planes, nothing. But they can use the artillery for what I believe they're going to use, which was the same thing in World War II. They're going to use them as anti-tank guns. And they're effective. I mean, it was an effective strategy in World War II, where flak cannons and even 88mm cannons and howitzers were used as anti-tank guns. If the standard anti-tank rifle couldn't penetrate a tank's armor, which was the case early on in the war, then at least a higher caliber howitzer will take down a tank. When in doubt, get a cannon and place it level to the ground to be able to take out a tank. Moving on. Before the retreating forces went across the bridge, they did ask if they had any spare dynamite. And my mindset, when the Lieutenant Colonel asked if they had any spare dynamite from the, I believe they said 58th Engineering Regiment, or Engineering Corps, I was thinking, okay, they're going to do some anti-tank traps. And this was an actual thing during many conflicts, be it World War II all the way up to Vietnam, where they would actually plant explosives in the ground and wait for tanks to come over them so that they could detonate it right up under the tank. Essentially blowing the tank in half, or just literally blowing a large hole through it and killing the entire crew and even the tank itself, sending it ablaze. But we'll get to that. Now, outside the outskirts of the town, the commander, the general, who is a female Nazi elf, essentially, who I think, in my mind, kind of looks like this, is in her Panzer, or at least, in my mind, a Panzer Mark 1. She's in a Panzer looking out at the town. She doesn't like it. I mean, yes, the information is 150 years old, which, 150-year-old Intel. Oh, Intel can screw up a lot in 150 years. Believe me. Do not trust Intel if you're a frontline soldier, especially if you're using World War II era equipment and strategy. Never trust Intel. Unless you are 100% certain Intel is solid. Vietnam's a good example. Moving on. What am I saying? Everything after Vietnam's a good example. She's looking out at this town through her binoculars. It's eerily quiet. Too quiet. Not... There at least should be some humans here. There should be something, at least. But it's too quiet. If anyone out there who understands guerrilla tactics, you know exactly what's going to come next. Or at least you can hypothesize what's going to come next if you haven't read the chapter. So instead, she sends in some panzers. They move into the city center. There's no one here. There's not a person. And immediately they go to combat. The platoon leader essentially calls back saying, there's no one here, and then they detonate the dynamite on 2 large towers, causing them to come down on the tank, on the 2 lead tanks, crushing them under the weight of the buildings.
Surprise, motherfucker!
Yeah, they do that. Because, I'm sorry, I don't care how good your tank is built, it's not going to be strong enough to withstand literally tons of building. I mean, maybe an Abrams, you know, maybe Challenger, maybe, but no, that's even stretching it. Because when tons of building is coming down on a tank, especially something the size of essentially a tower of nothing but brick and mortar, gravity's going to do the rest. Sir Isaac Newton, you know, object that stays in motion will continue being in motion, you know, that sort of thing. But in this case, gravity is on our side. Or everyone's side. It kind of depends on who's using gravity. But yeah, gravity was in play when the building came down on top of these 2 tanks and kind of smashed them to bits. And they're trying their best to raise comms with these guys. And when the general immediately tries to contact and find out what the hell's going on, a tanker pops out of the hatch and immediately is sniped.
Headshot!
Yeah, I've had that a couple times happen to me in Battlefield. I'm not joking. Battlefield 5, I was stupid enough to think that I could just go into town with the tank and then pop up on the turret thinking, you know what, I'm just going to start mowing these guys down and then immediately move forward. Yeah, no, you'll get sniped. This is kind of a common sense knowledge thing. We kind of learned this in World War II. If you're in a tank in an urban area, you are not safe. You are open to all attacks from all angles, be it above, below, or even ground level. You are not safe in a town, and tanks do not work in a town because of all the angles. This is no longer a symmetric war. This is now an asymmetrical warfare with ambushes all around. And I can imagine this being used, this tactic being used a lot by the Magus resistance. Or if there is a Magus resistance. Or even the Magus soldiers themselves, where they are essentially going to wait. Which, by the way, so far the Magus soldiers, these 300 soldiers have already taken out 2 tanks. They've taken out a tank commander on the 3rd one, and at which point they've tossed in a couple grenades, killing the 3rd tank. And the tanks are pulling out! They're being ordered to fall back. In this time period, they've taken out 3 panzers. 3. And snipers are going to do their job. And believe me, if you're a sniper in a town and you are in a good concealed position, because believe me, a panzer does not have a good field of view. Any tank does not have a good field of view, especially in urban combat. So this fight that's going to happen is going to be a bloody one. This is definitely going to give these elves a bloody nose. And I hope they do. Because I want to see these sons of bitches basically be killed. They need to be taught a lesson. They need to be knocked off their high horse that in open fields and open combat, you are superior. But in urban warfare, especially when the enemy knows its terrain, yeah, no, honey, you are not superior. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you take down the buildings. And even then, you're basically creating more rubble, more cover for the resistance, and more enemy soldiers, because a bombed-out building is less conspicuous and unsuspecting of possible rebel fighters and ambushes. And of course, as they're retreating, she orders her tanks, all tanker crews, to stay inside the tank. Not to get out and close all the hatches, essentially. And I'm just going to say this now. Even if you were to tell them to stay in their tanks, that's not a good idea. Because you're sending in these tanks without any sort of infantry support. Honey, you ain't Rommel. Not at all. Rommel understood that urban warfare is a hellhole and just absolute anarchy and open targets for tanks. Anyone can hide in a building and toss out Molotov cocktails or even grenades or even anti-tank grenades to disable or even destroy a tank because they have no visible view of an open terrained battlefield. Tanks are not built as an urban combat vehicle. They are built specifically for anti-tank and troop support. Honey, you're an idiot.
Dumbass! You dumbass! You're a dumbass! Such a dumbass! You're an ass!
Thank you, Red Foreman. Anyway, what's going to happen next? Don't know. The chapter ends with the tanks going into the town, and I bet you anything, my speculation of the next chapter is that they're going to have, or at least what's going to happen in the next chapter with my speculation. They have the cannons as anti-tank guns. They're obviously going to be set up in strategic points in positions throughout the town, where even if a tank turns a corner, they won't have the reaction time to take out those cannons. Much like World War II with the Germans and even us Americans who used anti-tank guns, but what am I saying, any sort of urban environment where anti-tank guns are easily hid within bombed-out buildings, you're not going to be able to have reaction time. Because once that tank goes past a certain building, all they have to do is pull that string or pull that trigger on that cannon, that round is going to go through that building and hit target on that tank, and it's going to go up in flames. If nothing else, they're probably going to use Molotov cocktails or at least some form of improvised weapon to take out these tanks. If not, using some form of... what am I saying? They're going to use any sort of form whatsoever of guerrilla tactics to take out these tanks. While they cannot fight them head-on, they can fight them in a guerrilla warfare style. And this is no more apparent than Vietnam, where our tanks were getting hammered left and right by VC forces who were using buildings as cover, because tankers had to call in to basically request permission to open fire on buildings because of basically collateral damage and civilian casualty avoidance. And I'm not gonna lie, folks, I'm looking forward to it, because my prediction of the next battle in this town, it's gonna be long, it's gonna be bloody. And they're going to be doing everything they can to try and take this town. But that's just how it is. Either way, though, thank you all for watching. As always, I've been AirsoftAL, the con man's Airsofter who reviews media, so you can check it out. Link to this chapter down below, and I recommend anyone to read it. And let me know your thoughts on the chapter right down there, and I'd love to hear you guys. I really would. Anyway, I look forward to the next chapter. I hope you guys do too. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you all in the next video. Till next time. Later!